Hey everyone. As we know, we've been doing this podcast for a while, and we have always gotten interest in the podcast relating to trust um, why was there a breakdown in trust between pharma and patients? My podcast tends to deal um, with engagement in pharma, anything that impacts pharma and the life sciences, and that includes cannabis, pharmacy, pharmaceutical companies, tobacco, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This podcast, one of the things I do like is that I'm a visiting professor at the Philadelphia College of Pharmacy in the master's program for biomedical writing, and I have the opportunity, the pleasure of working with Angela Wagner, who has been working on her master's thesis, and the master's thesis has been focusing on the reasons for the breakdown in trust between pharma specifically and patients, what caused it, and how do they go about fixing it. Um, Angela is a student in the master's program. She's working on her final thesis, and that is the thrust of her write-up. My name is Darshan Kulkarni, and this is Darshan Talks. Welcome, Angela. How are you?
Thanks, Darshan. I'm well. How are you?
I'm well. So, Angela, we've actually spent a little bit of time, a lot of time, working through the different components of your final presentation.
Yes.
And um, we are through the breakdown phase of what's going to be in your paper. Where are we now?
This week we're just going to take a look at, how the research is coming, issues that have come up, questions that I've had as I've done the research, and maybe get into some publication planning because as I'm writing the manuscript, it, becomes really important to know who am I writing the manuscript for exactly.
Very cool. Very
So
true.
we'll talk about that. Should I do a quick recap of what the project is, or
Please.
are we good?
No, no, please.
All right, quick recap. Try to get quicker every week, but there's a certain number of things that have to be added. So, this is my capstone project for the Master of Science in Biomedical Writing at U Sciences. My concept is, patient trust in pharmaceutical companies is low. A lot of people have put forth a lot of effort to try and make it better, and it doesn't necessarily seem to be helping. So it seemed like a good idea to kind of go back into what is trust and what is trust for the patient and what is trust for the patient in regard to the pharmaceutical company, which is different than trust in a physician, a trust in a researcher, or trust in just a website, because a lot of our interactions between patients and pharma are happening, in an online space. And it's important to, make sure the model can reflect that. So my model involves only empirical research that is about 10 years old or less. And, I think that's important too, because a lot of these models that are being used to understand trust are old. And it's not that, the humans are, different than they were 50 years ago, but we have new technology, we have new ways of interacting. And I think it's important to consider those because they may change, how trust is built. So my model has four parts. The first is benevolence, which is a value-added move on the part of the pharmaceutical company that the patient can recognize. It has no direct benefit to the pharmaceutical company. The second portion is attunement. It is a two-way construct, so it has to involve some sort of give and take, not necessarily in real time, but some sort of give and take between the individual patient and the pharmaceutical company. The three subparts of attunement are awareness, response, and harmony. And all of those are, necessary for attunement, which again is not necessarily value added. It can directly benefit the company. So my favorite reference is to say that benevolence would be a patient directory, or I'm sorry, a physician directory, that is essentially brand agnostic, so that it could damage the brand if the patient, chooses another, or the physician chooses another brand for the patient. Whereas attunement could be, say, a patient assistance program that is specifically for the brand. And even though that seems like maybe a benevolent gesture, it could have a direct benefit to the company in terms of number of scripts written. The third piece is integrity, a set of qualities that suggest incorruptibility. And I was able to find evidence about trust and integrity having to do specifically with written communication, and that I have worked into the outline for my project. The fourth piece is competence, which is a belief of the patient that the pharmaceutical company has advanced knowledge of a subject and also that it can communicate the knowledge in a way that the target audience can assimilate without a lot of undue effort. So it has to be easy to understand and readily available. So those are the four basic parts. And if you wanted to see more of what the model of trust looks like, it actually is online, and Darshan was kind enough to put it up, tinyurl.com/model of trust. All right, so in a nutshell, my project involves Twitter data analysis and then analyzing pharmaceutical websites. The point being, if I can't test the model with live patients, which I could not do for this particular project, then how do I decide what patients feel or think, or how do they trust, how much trust do they have for various pharmaceutical brands? And then, is there a correlation between patient trust and the way that these brands are using their websites, the information that they're putting on there, the usability aspects, or a few different things. So that is the basics. Now I guess we can get into my status update, unless, are there any questions, Darshan?
I think we're good so far.
Okay, cool. All right, so we go into the status update.
Just by the way, have you had any questions so far or comments?
I have not, but tonight I might. Maybe tonight I'll
Tonight's the magic night. I can feel
deal
it.
with something that's really controversial, and somebody will jump in, and you never know.
I have to apologize to everyone. For some reason, I have an extremely romantic look behind me. I'm not quite either that or I haven't paid my lights bill. One of those two. But it is what it is.
That's beautiful. It's real life.
It's real life. What that taught me is I need higher watt bulbs, but that's what's going on. So please continue.
All right. Okay, so project status for this week. Let's take a look at the handy dandy Gantt chart, which I have updated for week number 2, and we're looking at week 10, 2nd of April, being the time I have to submit a rough manuscript draft for review to the instructors for this, this course for the research project. And then the week of April 16th, I have to submit the final manuscript and my slide deck or poster, but I'm thinking slide deck, but we'll talk about that later. I have to submit that for review. So this is week 2. I have finished the Twitter data analysis, and I believe Darshan is going to do another copy to avoid bias, but we'll talk about that, I guess.
We will. You need to still give me the data and access to it to play with it. So
I haven't, or I have?
Not that I'm aware of.
It should be on Dropbox.
Oh.
Because I was sending these updates. Have you looked at it yet? Is it okay to fix something? Because I kept finding.
No, I missed something somewhere. So let's talk about that as well.
I can nag on that later.
Please. Thank you.
All right, so got that started. The draft is about 25% complete of the manuscript. I have worked on the integrity piece, which is the discern quality analysis, and I've actually done the HCP directory piece. I did that today. So there are some interesting things that came up, and we can talk about that next. So for now, I am pretty much on target to get everything done on time. So life is good.
Very cool.
All right. Okay. So, yes, I'm sorry.
No, please continue.
Okay. So in the discern data collection and analysis, I actually discovered that there were some, there are 15 questions. And as I went through each website, looking at their disease awareness, and, again, disease awareness is not required of a pharmaceutical website. It's a nice to have. Different brands approached it differently. Some brands actually split up their disease awareness onto 3 or 4 different pages. And I think that is possibly because, up to somewhat recently, they were having to put less content on each page so that it would load faster. And now what I'm seeing is sites are using more of a mobile approach. So they're kind of optimizing for mobile. And if you're on a desktop, you just have to look at it like you would mobile. But because there's less content, it loads faster. So um, that could be why they're doing it. But that I'm actually not analyzing. I mean, I could, but I'm not because I have more than enough things to choose from. So anyway, as I was going about it, I discovered that there were actually 6 questions that seemed to be most relevant. And this was not in my original plan, so it is a post hoc. But I wanted to bring it up here because, you know, it just seemed relevant to do so. So these are the 6 questions, that seem to be most important for a pharmaceutical website. Some of the other ones, like the discussion of alternative treatments to the brand. Again, that's not required. Some brands did, some brands didn't discuss competitors. And the brands that did, I thought they had a better overall quality, but it wasn't completely necessary for this analysis. So I am planning to do the post-hoc analysis in addition to totals by indication and totals by brand, which would be just a ranking. So, the key question, total by indication, I think that makes perfect sense. But I thought about reporting the proportions as well. So kind of the percentile rank. How close is drug X website to being perfect? If we measure perfect as it meets, it gets 5s, it's 100% yes on all of these quality questions in the Discern tool. So it seemed relevant to me, but I thought, I would put it out there and see, does it matter? Do we need to know how close drug X is to getting 5 out of 5 on all these questions?
I think it matters only if you're going to be measuring, you're going to be comparing trust between the different drugs, which you aren't doing because we're looking at the industry as a whole.
Well, I mean, I am comparing, sentiment for brand X to website for brand X. I am comparing those. So,
Okay.
perhaps rank is not, I mean, rank is important, I think. It is interesting to see who's doing it,
Yeah.
the best, if you will. But I also thought there would be value in seeing how close is drug X to the benchmark and measuring trust that way so that, perhaps it's 75% is considered trustworthy. I don't know.
It's an interesting angle. I think if we decide to do it, we have to do it. I think your paper's pretty long already. And I'm a little concerned that it's just another rabbit hole we can go down. I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm saying that at a certain point you've got to cut yourself off.
Right, right.
So I think we're there. So
All right. Well, great. I did have an unexpected finding. I found that the discern scores varied significantly by indications for the same brand. And I had thought going into it that there would be a sort of a uniformity because
yeah.
there's so much review for the web content before it can go live. But it turns out that is not the case.
See, as someone who actually reviews them, that's not what you're reviewing for. You're not reviewing for consistency. You're
I'm not,
reviewing.
but I did notice that, you would assume that a brand maintains quality across all indications, but they
No.
didn't.
Across all indications, yes.
Yeah, across all indications. They had, I mean, it was pretty obvious that they were like different teams working on different indications at different times.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a
so,
really interesting finding to pull out.
but it was interesting because one of the analyses that I did was, I averaged by brand because that is, of course, totals by brand is one of the pieces that I had decided to analyze ahead of time. And, there was a lot of variation. It was very surprising to see how much variation there was.
Now, you do realize it's a limitation that you're going to use an average. I assume you mean mean when you say that, because
Right.
theoretically, I would argue um, the big maybe you should be comparing it to based on total sales and weigh it based on sales because that's how people actually understand the brand
Sure.
based on what's being pitched. But it's a limitation. I don't think it's a massive limitation, but it's just something we need to consider, at least acknowledge.
Yeah. And again, in terms of what I'm reporting, I'm also reporting the totals by indication by brand, so it will reflect the difference.
Okay.
between, for example, like Humira has 10 indications. And again, it was not uniform across. I was very surprised. So I want to make sure that I capture that there are individual teams working on each of these indications, and that
Fair enough.
they are following various quality
So what's
control.
the question?
Well, there really wasn't a question about that. It was just an interesting finding.
Fair enough. Fair
I
enough.
feel like if we don't include interesting little bits, people might fall asleep.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
All right, so next, the healthcare provider directory data. I had an unexpected finding as I was working through that today, and it is something that needs to be sort of addressed. So the unexpected finding was that some brand sites are including links to telemedicine providers. And this example on the screen is Emgality. And this is the first page, and then the second slide, actually it is one page, but you scroll down. So you can see it actually is very detailed, explaining to the patient how to go about using this telemedicine concept.
I find
And
that
it was on the
fascinating.
brand site.
I find that really risky.
Well, I mean, it is a third-party site. I went to the site, I looked at it. They did not talk about prescribing a particular brand.
Well, but you're coming from a particular website.
I'm sorry? Oh, did I lose you?
No, sorry, I had to sneeze and I figured doing it.
Oh, I'm sorry. How dare you?
No, I was saying that I recognize that it's supposed to be independent,
Mhm.
but the fact that it's coming from a single website could influence that quite significantly, don't you think?
It could, but wait till you see the next slide.
Okay.
So this was something I did not expect to find. I knew that there were directories out there because I had found a few. I looked at the study data from doctor.com, and I was surprised to see that patients wanted a healthcare provider directory on a pharma website, and that kind of blew my mind. And I discovered that apparently some brands had been reading that, and they went ahead and put one on there. What I did not expect was to find a telemedicine website. Not that I wouldn't expect to find it on any brand, because actually there are a few things. I think there's like a birth control company that will get you a telemedicine appointment. There are a few different sort of third parties that will do things like that. But I didn't necessarily expect to find it on a brand that had a lot of ad spend. So I found this for Emgality, and then I also found it for Otezla and Xofluza. So 3 out of 18 brands had
That's fascinating.
these, and it wasn't for all indications. So Otezla has indications, I believe PSA, and I think there's another one, but PSA, PSO, so psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis. So for psoriasis, they had the dermatologist on call link. They did not have anything like that for psoriatic arthritis.
Huh.
And again, I mean, dermatology is something that's fairly easy to do over telemedicine because mostly, in this case, it would probably be visual. Whereas
That's not what Dr.
rheumatology
Pimple
may
Popper
require
taught me.
X-rays.
Dr. Pimple Popper has taught me that it is not easy to do via telemedicine.
But in any case, they're offering it.
Fair enough.
And my model, my analysis framework did not allow for that. So here we are. So my unexpected finding is that some sites had third-party telemedicine provider links. And I'm wanting to know, how should I accommodate that with minimal alteration to my framework? These are not all of my analysis items. It's just the ones that were most relevant that I kind of struggled with. So, the brand indication directory, I mean, technically, no. We want to be able to capture that it's a telemedicine link, not a directory link.
So this is very clearly not benevolence. This is attenuation, right?
This is integrity. I'm sorry, not integrity. This is attunement.
Attunement.
No. Oh my goodness. I just completely forgot which one it was. Give me a sec. It is benevolence, yes.
Why benevolence?
Because an HCP directory is value added. It's supposed to be.
Hold on. The telemedicine part is very much.
Well, okay, it's a third-party site. There is no direct affiliation with the company, right? So patient can go to a medicine provider and get any drug.
Sure, but he's not going to, if I talk to the telemedicine provider and I go, Can you help me with psychosis? He's going to be like, no, that's not what I do. So it's got to be
Right.
someone who does this work, whether it's dermatology or whatever else it is.
Okay.
So I would argue, at the very least, it's attunement, uh, maybe integrity.
Okay. But how do you get past the fact that if you are a telemedicine provider, I mean, you're a licensed physician, let's say.
Yeah.
I know in some states you can be a PA or an NP, but I actually have not done a lot of telemedicine. I've done some, telemedicine visits with like third parties.
Yeah.
They were always physicians. They were never PAs or NPs.
No, I know PAs doing
I know
telemedicine.
they can, but for whatever reason, they didn't on these particular.
Sure.
But in any case, they are an independent licensed provider.
Right.
They see you, they know, they get information from you about medical records, and they decide what to prescribe you, but they are not required to prescribe you any particular thing. So in that case, it is benevolent because there is no guarantee that you're going to prescribe, that particular brand. And these are all independent sites.
I get that. I'd be very curious how LMR or PRC, whatever you want to call it, reviews this, because I worry about kickback issues.
That's true.
And if I worry about kickback issues, by definition, but I need to worry about the fact that it's not a one-way program anymore, because a kickback only works if there's something coming back to you, which means that it takes you out of beneficence at that point.
That's true. It would. There is no, if you're receiving a kickback, it's certainly not benevolent. It could still be attunement, although it would be highly illegal.
Which is why I was asking that question.
Yeah, but I think it still counts. I mean, unless you can prove that there is some sort of backward movement to the pharmaceutical company from whatever companies are, handling the third party, telemedicine piece. But if we assume that they are independent of each other, which would be the same as a healthcare directory from doctor.com or from Healthgrades or from, one of the other groups. Again, it, as far as we are all aware, is an independent entity. So it would still be benevolent.
Well, they're getting charged $4. It's a consultation. $4 is by definition not fair market value.
Well, let me see. Let me go back to the $4. $4 fee is associated with the physician consultation.
So, which means they're being paid for somehow.
They would have to, yeah, that is true. Although it is, let's see, independent licensed healthcare provider, $4 fee. That is true. Although it doesn't say, it says a $4 fee is associated with the consultation, but it doesn't clearly say that they're not going to bill your insurance. So it would be a matter of going out to that website and seeing if they bill for telemedicine and if the $4 fee is somehow different.
I think you're assuming. If I was DOJ, I would be looking at this really closely. I'm not suggesting it's illegal or legal. I'm sure that these companies have gotten some great advice, which makes them think that this works. But I know that this is something I need to ask questions. If that's true, I would struggle putting into beneficence because there's something in it by definition. And the reason I'm raising that point is, what factor are you measuring here?
I was actually, measuring what patients have said they wanted, which is in this case a directory.
Yeah.
And they also want the ability to schedule.
Okay.
So that's the second piece. And because they also want the ability to schedule from a pharmaceutical website, that tells me that a telemedicine provider would be included. Now, maybe it's not. Maybe I should leave this out entirely.
I'm leaning towards leaving it out because it just adds so much complexity to this.
Well,
I
hold on. Certainly leave it out.
Here's my question. If you keep it in, let's sort of analyze it, right? If you keep it in, maybe this becomes an opportunity to evaluate whether companies that have this engender more trust.
That is true.
If they engender more trust, you can then evaluate whether that trust is misplaced or not. I don't know how you get to
I
that
don't
step.
know. I think that whether it's misplaced or not, that might be
Outside the
outside the
question.
scope of this
Yeah,
project, but it'd be great for another one.
yeah. And based on what am I going to base that on?
Well, I mean, that's a good point. If you were going to base it on, in terms of, should we be trusting? We're going to base it on things like the healthcare provider directory. Is it third party? Is it transparently third party? And I think, in terms
Well,
of
the
should
same
we
kind of
trust,
position.
transparency might be part of it. Although, transparency is not required for trust, but perhaps it's required in order to keep it.
Transparency is not required for trust. Is that true?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Honesty, truthfulness, not required. Terrifying. It's an ethical imperative, to be honest. It's an ethical imperative to be, providing truthful information, but unfortunately, it is not required in order to build trust.
That is scary as hell to me. I'm trying to turn off all the
It's very
beeps.
scary, but that's why it's so important to be ethical when you're building a website.
Okay.
Right,
So let's go back. So what is it that we want to do? We want to.
Do we want to keep it in? Do we want to take it out? Well, let me go back to my little rubric thing here.
Yeah.
So, do we want to create a new field for telemedicine? I think we should. I think it's worth looking at.
Okay.
Okay.
But then you got to do the analysis.
I'll do that one. Same directory for differing indications. This was important because, again, if you just put one big directory out there and you're not filtering it, the patients won't necessarily know who to see. I mean, okay, let's do Humira as an example. Humira has 10 indications. There's some overlap. I mean, you've got people with psoriatic arthritis. They may have ankylosing spondylitis. They may have psoriasis.
Sure.
They may have some other things, but there's also they probably don't have juvenile arthritis.
Yeah, probably not.
So, that's a different group. Or juvenile Crohn's would be a different group than adult Crohn's. And so, I wanted to make sure that they didn't do this. And actually, I haven't found where anybody did have the same directory for different indications. So it may be a moot point, but I wanted to make sure that I examined it anyway. So is using the same telemedicine service for different specialties, is that the same as using the same directory for different indications? I'm going to say no. I don't think it should result in the loss of a point. Do you have an opinion?
No, because I'm still struggling, to be honest. I'm trying to understand. I'd be curious, actually. Maybe people can comment on this. Does it make sense to keep this in the paper? I feel like we're going down a rabbit hole. And let's go back to the question. The question you're asking is what? What is the question you're asking?
All right. In this case, it was
no. The actual paper. Why was there a breakdown in trust?
Okay. Well, I can't answer why there was a breakdown, but I can answer how it is built and see how pharmaceutical.
Okay. How is trust built?
How is trust
built? That's the question.
Okay. Well. Yeah.
And what factors did we decide we're going to look at? When we originally decided? Let's not get into. Oh, this is interesting too. What did we decide were the factors we're going to look at? The website.
Well, we decided to look at benevolence, attunement, integrity, competence.
I'm sorry, I should have been clearer. Okay. On how we looked at those factors, but comparing it to what are we said we're going to look at the website itself.
Yeah.
And determine whether it demonstrated benevolence, integrity, attunement. Okay.
Attunement and competence. So I picked one thing to study for each of these parts of the model. And this is the benevolence part. So we're looking at the healthcare provider directory. And actually the questions came from the study that was done, the doctor.com study.
I think the telemedicine potentially takes it away from the benevolence question.
Okay. So
let's get rid of the telemedicine part, because I think it's very easy to argue that goes into attunement. And there's just too much complexity. I think you keep your analysis on healthcare directory and leave it there. Yeah.
Okay. So if you don't have a healthcare directory, but you do have a telemedicine link, it's just, is there an equivalent?
I think you count that as a healthcare directory. No, do you? Maybe we define the word healthcare directory more broadly.
Okay. But again, that leads us to these same problems. So, for example, a telemedicine directory doesn't have third-party ratings, and that is a +1 for trust. If you have third-party ratings, it means you're making it even clearer that you have nothing to gain from sending the patient to this doctor, right? So in order to make sure it's value added, it's like, nope, this is not part of, of the brand necessarily. This is just a benefit to you.
Then we said originally that the intention was to only look at whether there's a HCP directory.
Sure.
Then we
didn't
hold
know
the
there
line.
were telemedicine links.
But that's not the question. We had decided what the question was. We don't get to change the question because we found something else that's interesting.
Okay, so you don't believe that a telemedicine link is equivalent to a directory scheduling feature?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I will leave it out. That is fine. That makes my life easier. It's one less thing to realize.
And if people disagree, please let me know. But I think we need to also include that as a limitation, because we could have gone down this path,
Sure.
but we decided not to.
Yeah. I honestly, I was so surprised to find it.
Yeah.
It was like, well, how do I incorporate this? Is it the same? What do I do? So, okay, yeah, I'll leave it out. That's fine. That is fine. And let's see, moving on. The publication plan.
Okay.
So, I've looked at conferences. You could do a webinar. Conference would have to be probably a poster, would be typical.
What do you want to do with this? Is your goal to get a job, or is it?
Yeah, go ahead.
What is your goal?
My goal would be to present this to people who actually care about the information in it. So, my goal is not necessarily to, be published by X journal or be involved in X conference, but really just to make sure that people who could benefit from hearing about the findings are actually the ones who are the audience.
Are you more comfortable writing? Or are you more comfortable speaking? Which is a weird question to ask a medical writer who's graduating.
I can do either.
Okay. You do both.
I probably am, better at writing since that is, kind of my vocation.
Yeah.
But I don't mind speaking. I enjoy the visual aids a lot, so it's kind of, even speaking is still writing.
I'm leaning towards DIA to see what they would do. That might make.
Okay. I mean, it does fit with like a patient engagement, which I know is a big DIA thing.
Yeah.
But do they have requirements having to do with the type of research? I'm trying to remember.
Well, I think you should do some research into what their requirements are.
Okay.
On that side.
When I last checked, which was actually this week, it was that it could not have been previously, not previously published, not previously presented.
But it has not been.
The question is, has it been previously presented? Does this constitute presentation?
I would argue no, because you are not publishing your final results.
Okay. And actually, I have been careful not to put any results
exactly
on here because you never know. All right, so DIA poster, is that?
I would say DIA write-up with a poster, not a poster, with a presentation, like a webinar or something.
With a deck.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know who I would contact about that, or is it just general?
I'm trying to think. Who do I know at DIA? If someone knows someone at DIA, feel free to reach out to us. Let me do some thinking.
Okay. Now, as part of the grading system for this
I know
project, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I just know a couple of people who have to go in through an unusual channel, through the advertising channel. Oh. But I know a few people there. I also know some people through the medical affairs channels. So I can reach out and we'll have that conversation. But yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm normally required to submit some sort of a manuscript to some sort of a publication.
Yeah.
In addition to doing the deck, I don't know if it meets requirement for that.
I think you start off with the DIA thing, and that is where you're submitting it.
Right, but now that's just the presentation portion.
No, remember we're going to do the write-up and
that's
then
the write-up.
Yeah.
The write-up. You're right. Sorry.
No problem.
It has been a really, really long day. I don't know if this day has more than 24 hours in it.
Yeah, I
It's
think I'm
possible.
feeling it. This is my fourth talk today, so
Oh my gosh.
we're
All
good.
right. So, okay. So perhaps that is the best plan. I mean, I looked at, other
I think
publications.
AMWA is your next backup after that.
True, but there aren't many people doing promo. And it feels
Hmm.
like patient trust. I mean, it may not be completely promo, but we're dealing with a lot of, research oriented writing and regulatory writing.
Yeah.
And, that's I mean, it's becoming more patient centric, I think, over time, but it's still not
When is DIA? I think DIA is in May, I believe.
May.
You
I know I
graduate in
got
May.
the notice this week that they were accepting, um, just blanked, abstracts. They're accepting abstracts. I'm so
There you
tired.
go. So that's why I was thinking this might be a good sort of addition to it.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, that is a plan, and that was way easier than I thought. So thank you.
No problem. I think your backups are AMWA. What else would you look at?
I'd look at AMWA, and then after that, I wasn't really sure.
I think there's some trade journals we can look at as well.
I mean, I looked and I discovered that some of the journals that might have been a good fit were actually discontinued,
Okay.
and that was unfortunate.
Well,
So there were some that were specifically like pharmaceutical marketing type, where they might have been sort of the right audience. I mean, there
I have
could be
some.
several different audiences for this, so it's kind of
I mean, I can also we can do a podcast on Pharma Marketing Network, which has a massive following as well. So, what is the definition of the word publishing?
that's true. I mean, publishing can be many things these days.
Yeah. So, or Medium. That's when you get really. I mean, you can get a lot of eyeballs with that. So that could be interesting. But options to consider if DI is not an option. So
Sure.
I think we start from there. You also want to talk about your resume.
Did I? What did I want to talk about with my resume aside from?
Are you happy with it, or you want to
Am I
discuss
happy?
what
Um,
review where?
I'm relatively happy with it. I mean, because I'm sort of, I guess, cross-functional, a traditional CV doesn't fit me overly well. The sort of things that I have worked on, in medical writing have not been the sort of thing that you would be able to attribute authorship to because they are generally anonymous. So that
Yeah.
would, a little bit challenging. Um, uh, I mean, I
Well,
recently,
what kind of jobs are you applying for?
I actually haven't applied for any yet.
What kind of jobs would you like to apply for?
I'm open. I don't mind promo, but there are other pieces that would be interesting too.
Like what?
Doing more research based work. I enjoy that.
Do you really want to go and write regulatory documents?
Well, I don't know. Well, I didn't say regulatory.
I did. I know you did not actually trying to eliminate is what I'm trying to do.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've
Maybe
actually, I've
just
taken
learn.
classes in regulatory, and I didn't mind them. It was nice because it's not overly creative.
Well, you're still telling a story.
Oh yeah, you're telling a story, and there's value, but you're not also expected to work out a layout at the same time.
Right.
It seems like regulatory is much more of a project management environment, which I have some familiarity with that, but
Okay. Fair
I
enough.
don't know. I mean, I really kind of have done a lot of different things, so I'm not sure. I am
Okay.
not sure. So that makes
Um,
it really fun.
I think another question we've got to figure out is so what I'm hearing you say is all the jobs are fine, but I think your resume is going to echo stronger around PRC stuff or at least promo stuff.
Possibly, yeah, yeah.
Um, are you thinking like a copywriter's job, or you think you can go higher up?
Well, I mean, I've already been a copywriter.
Right.
It was okay. Didn't love it.
Okay.
I mean, I liked the work. I did not necessarily like being, not having any sort of creative control over what I was doing.
Okay.
That was
So you're thinking more scientific communications.
possibly. Again, I mean, it seems like every company frames their medical writing a little differently.
Sure. But
So it's not, like other industries where you can go, well, I'm going to do X, and it's clear what X is, and it's clear what the role of X entails,
right.
and it's clear, what sort of background you need to have. So,
I mean, I can think of a couple of things that you'd be really well suited for, even from a
mm,
regulatory perspective. Like an example would be lay summary writing.
yeah, actually,
Um,
that probably would be a good fit.
yeah.
I enjoy the scientific bits, but
Mm.
I also enjoy being able to translate them, into something that a patient would understand.
Right. And I think
Done that for a while.
another one that could be really good is working with the marketing teams to translate their data for the first time for an FDA submission. Um, so it's an element of copywriting, an element of project management, but really doing it from the other side, so from the agency side. I
Mm-hmm.
think that really pulls in some of your expertise as well. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
so I think what you really want to start looking at maybe is what are those job descriptions,
Mm.
and depending on what you find, then we can work on sort of framing your resume and this experience towards that.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. We can do that.
Yeah, and I think right now you're starting to nod, which to me means you're burnt
Uh,
down. Yeah,
well, it's been a really big
yeah,
session this time. We've been dealing with
yeah. It's 40 minutes. We usually aim for about 20. Um, it's not the marathon 1.5 hour we had, but fair enough. Okay, Angela, this was wonderful seeing you as always. We'll aim again next week. It won't be at the regular time because I think I have something else, but we'll talk about that as well.
Sure.
Um, yeah, we'll figure it out. Thank you, Angela, for coming on.
Thank you, Darshan. Most appreciated.